my boy.
Hello all, and welcome back to the CDI Spotlight. I featured a fair number of games from my collection over these past 2 years in various spotlights. And as you can see, even though I do have a lot of CDI titles, well, I'm running a little low on options. Last year, I did choose a few games at random, to help fill in the gaps. But that isn't really what the Spotlight is for. I really do want to showcase CDI games that are good or, at the very least, interesting. To me at least. A lot of the games that I have left are either edutainment games or kid games, or a combination of both, honestly. Now, neither of those is necessarily a bad thing, but I feel like I wouldn't have much to talk about with most of these titles. But then I noticed something interesting on the back of some of the cases. Some of the games have big name actors associated with them, or at least big at the time. So today's video is going to feature some of the games in my library that have a big name actor associated with them. This way I'll be able to talk about some of the games that I wouldn't necessarily want to give a dedicated spotlight to. That being said, let's get started. I want to start with a quick recap on a couple of games that were already featured in their own spotlights. First up is Voyeur. Voyeur has a couple of high-profile actors, namely Robert Culp and Grace Zabriskie. Both were in hundreds of shows and or movies, and I did gloss over some of their bigger titles to focus on shows and movies that, I recognized. I know, it's stupid, but I don't really have a witty retort here. It was stupid, so moving on. Starting with Robert Culp was in Greatest American Hero, I Spy, Everybody Loves Raymond, and my personal favorite, Santa's Sleigh. I also learned while making this video that Robert Culp is the narrator in Eminem's Guilty Conscience song, so that's cool. Voyeur isn't the only video game that he was a part of either. He also voice acted in Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2. Moving on to Grace Zabriskie, she was in Armageddon, Fern Gully, Fried Green Tomatoes, and another personal favorite of mine, Child's Play 2. She was also in a few episodes of Seinfeld as well. Her most notable role was that she was featured in the show Twin Peaks. Voyeur was the only video game listed on Grace's IMDb page, at least until The Quarry was released earlier this year. Next up is Zombie Dinos from Planet Zeltoid. And here I thought I would never have another chance to talk about this game. As I mentioned in the review, our pal Dex is voiced by Cam Clark. Cam is a well-versed voice actor who has had over 400 roles. He's probably most famous for voicing Leonardo in the 1980s Ninja Turtles, voicing Kaneda in the English dub of Akira, and Liquid Snake from Metal Gear Solid. He's also voiced a ton of other video game characters. In fact, too many to really count. So I won't. Otherwise, I'd be here all day. Okay, so I wanted to go over those two games again for the sake of completeness. Voyeur and Zombie Dinos don't feature actors on the back of their boxes, but these games do have some pretty big name actors regardless. All that being said, let's get into some of the newer titles, starting with Mother Goose Hidden Pictures. Mother Goose Hidden Pictures, which actually almost sounds like a bad kung fu movie title, stars Linda Arnold. Linda Arnold is best known for her children's music. She was apparently discouraged by the lack of quality music for her kids back in the day, so she made her own. Anyway, without further ado, let's check out Mother Goose Hidden Pictures. So Mother Goose Hidden Pictures starts off with a pretty decent animated intro. Let's see if the rest of the game holds up. Nope. So all the nursery rhymes are sung over still images. The images look okay, I guess. Actually, I think they look kind of weird for the CDI. It's also weird because most of the songs start zoomed in on part of the image, and then it zooms out. Or vice versa. I'm not entirely sure why they just didn't make more stills, or used a different art style to make it easier on them. For those of you familiar with these rhymes, you may be wondering how long these songs are. Okay, I doubt anyone actually watching this is really wondering that, but the thought did cross my mind since I read a lot of these nursery rhymes to my kids. In any case, as one can imagine, the songs are very short. You'd think they'd pick some longer songs so the developers could get their bang for their buck with Linda. Or maybe it would cost too much to have her sing more. Well, I mean, there are 26 rhymes to choose from though, so I guess they kinda did get a good amount of songs out of her. Now, the game is called Mother Goose Hidden Pictures. So, where are the hidden pictures? Well, once the player views the nursery rhyme, they're able to play a hidden object minigame. There are 3 objects for the player to find, and there's even a hint system to help those that are stuck. Finding all 3 of these pictures rewards the player with a short animation based on the nursery rhyme that they just watched. And that's really all this game has to offer. Let's check out another song before we wrap this review up.
I love little birds.
What the hell is wrong with this lady? High quality songs my ass. Disgusting songs aside, there's really not much else to say about Mother Goose Hidden Pictures. I don't know much about Linda Arnold, and to be honest, I don't think I really want to know more at this point. In all seriousness though, her singing voice is good, but the pictures that the developers used are weird. Honestly, I really wouldn't bother showing this to my kids. I'd probably just stick with the Wiggles. Back to the CDI game though, the short animations use that familiar CDI art style, and I really do like those. I just wish there were more. If I had to give Mother Goose Hidden Pictures a rating, I'd probably give it a 1.5 cats out of 5. Oddly enough, there is another Mother Goose game out there that also features Linda Arnold called Mother Goose Rhymes in Color. From what I've seen, it looks similar to Cartoon Jukebox. Fortunately, I don't have that one, so we're safe from that game for now. In any case, Mother Goose Hidden Pictures is definitely a weird game in the CDI library. Oh well, let's check out The Dark Fables of Aesop. The Dark Fables of Aesop features the one and only Danny Glover. I'm excited for this. I like Danny Glover, so I'm expecting good things here. For those that don't know, Danny Glover has a very extensive filmography, and he's been in films such as Lethal Weapon, Predator 2, Angels in the Outfield, and Saw. Before I start, I just want to point out that you can listen to the tracks on this disc via the CDI player. It allows the player to listen to all the fables from the game. Anyone that purchased the game new would have seen a track number for all the fables when played in a CD player. With that out of the way, without further ado, let's see what this game is like. Animation! Well, let's not get too excited. Like Mother Goose Hidden Pictures, most of this game is a static image with a voiceover. The first thing the player is presented with is a large picture that features the various fables. The player has the option to scroll left or right to find a fable that they want to hear. It's a little strange, but you do get used to it. Honestly, I think I prefer Mother Goose's setup, but yeah, that's just my opinion. In any case, you can click on an icon to hear what that story is. To listen to it, you have to click it twice. Again, it's kind of weird, but I guess it makes sense. To make this game weirder, the fable doesn't even start when you click on it. It starts when you hit the play button. I know I'm being nitpicky, but there's honestly not much else to nitpick gameplay-wise. Speaking of the UI, there are 2 other options here as well, Moral and Picture. Moral goes into a little more detail on the moral of the story, and picture is a gallery of still images from the fable. Each fable features a voiceover over a still image. One neat thing that the Dark Fables of Aesop has going for it is the player has the option to pause the narration. It's the first time I think I've seen this feature in this type of game, so that's pretty cool. One more thing about the animation, or lack thereof, the main fable is a voiceover over a still image, but the moral section is animated. Again, I'm left asking why not animate the whole thing? I'm sure they had their reasons, but it doesn't make much sense to me. One thing the Dark Fables of Aesop has going for it, though, is its artwork. It's honestly really good. It's honestly a lot better than Mother Goose. It's also interesting how the Dark Fables of Aesop share similar features to Mother Goose Hidden Pictures. That is, there's a main reading and then an animated short. These games aren't made by the same group, as far as I know. Oh well, it's probably just a coincidence. Back to the fables. There's a section for the player to click on that describes the character or characteristic of each of the animals from the fables. It helps reinforce the message of the fable, so that's pretty cool. There's also an icon for the game to play all the fables one after the other, in case you want to listen to your fables non-stop. In the way of gameplay, Dark Fables of Aesop is lacking, but it does have a unique game of its own. There are no hidden pictures in this game, but there is a maze puzzle, and it's bare bones at best. It's hard to navigate, with the mouse at least, and it honestly looks terrible. I only tried it on easy mode, and I never beat it. The reason being, this game is poorly programmed. See, the CDI controller technically only has 2 input buttons. The first button starts the frog on his journey. The other resets the game, putting the frog back at the beginning. Guess which button I hit when I got near the end? Yep. Danny Glover is the clear standout for this game. I honestly don't know if I would have played the Dark Fables of Aesop if I hadn't seen that he did the voiceover work. Danny Glover's readings are actually pretty great. He even voice acts for some of the characters on the screen. I expect nothing less from the man that played Detective Tapp in Saw. If I were to give Dark Fables of Aesop a rating, I'd give it 2.5 funny animal expressions out of 5. Better than Mother Goose Hidden Pictures, but not by much. It really only gets an extra point because of Danny Glover. There is a follow-up game called More Dark Fables of Aesop, but it is pretty rare. Based on some of the promotional work that I've seen, it looks like Danny Glover provided narration for that game as well. Also, going back to the Dark Fables of Aesop based on this promotional ad, it appears that there are 60 mazes in the Dark Fables of Aesop that apparently help reinforce morals in a fun way. I'm not sure what they meant by that. The only thing I got from the maze that I played was that it was a poorly designed game. In any case, speaking of narration by Danny Glover, I do have another game that's narrated by him. That other game is Brer Rabbit and the Wonderful Tar Baby. Brer Rabbit starts off with a pretty cool animated wizard. He gives the player 3 choices, even though one of those choices is just to end the game. There are really only 2 things to do in Brer Rabbit: listen to the main story, or play a selection of minigames. To be fair though, most of the minigames are based on what you hear in the story, but more on that in a bit. The main story is actually adapted from one of the Uncle Remus stories that were published back in 1881. Uncle Remus is actually a fictional character that acts as a narrator of the stories. These Uncle Remus stories are actually a collection of African American folktales that were compiled and adapted by Joel Chandler Harris and published in 1881. This is actually the last interesting thing I have to say about this game, unfortunately. Like Mother Goose and Aesop, the main story is a narration over still images. I actually kind of find the artwork to be disturbing. I can honestly say that I don't think I would have liked this when I was a child. It also has some very strange imagery, and the story is odd, to say the least. The basic gist of the story is Brer Fox creates a doll out of tar and dresses it up to resemble a person. The goal of this is to trap Brer Rabbit. The story honestly feels like it goes on and on forever. And even though I say that as a negative, it's actually probably a good thing though, since the story is the main point of the game. As a buyer, I'd want the most bang for my buck. But without animation, it honestly just drags. Okay, let's talk about the minigames that are featured on this game. There are several games the player can play, and they range from decent to insulting. There's a quiz game where a narrator, not Danny Glover, asks the player questions about the story. There's a memory game and a spot the difference game, a one of these things is not like the other type of game, and one of the dumbest things I've ever seen in a game, a multiple choice question that allows the player to pick their favorite part of the story based on a limited amount of options. There are no consequences to getting the questions wrong. It just gives the player another chance to pick the right answer. One cool thing that this Brer Rabbit game has going for it, before I end this review, is that it has a section that describes the author, the stories, and has activities that parents can do with their children. And hey, anything that gives parents a chance to play another game with their kid is a win in my book. So Brer Rabbit feels a little more bare bones than the other two games that I've played. Like the Dark Fables of Aesop, if it weren't for Danny Glover's narration, I really doubt I would have ever played this game. Speaking of, the only reason that I do own this game, besides for collecting CDI games, is because this is one of the CDI games that I found in the wild along with Cartoon Jukebox and Dark Castle. Since I probably won't review the other game, I'll just say it here. I'm pretty sure the other game that I found was a Richard Scarry game. In any case, as for a rating, I'd give Brer Rabbit 2 disturbing images out of 5. Again, I'm bumping this rating up due to Danny Glover's narration. Next up is Pegasus. This is another story-based game, and it features the talents of Mia Farrow. Mia Farrow is best known for Rosemary's Baby, The Purple Rose of Cairo, The Last Unicorn, and much, much more. Taking a quick look at the back of the box, I see a familiar wizard and layout, so I think I'm starting to see a pattern with these games. Oh well, let's give it a try. As I figured from the back of the box, the interface is exactly the same as Brer Rabbit. That being said, there's really not a lot to talk about here. I like the artwork of Pegasus a lot better than Brer Rabbit. In fact, this game's artwork actually reminds me a lot of the artwork from The Last Unicorn. I also enjoyed this story more than Brer Rabbit as well. You see, Pegasus revolves around the Greek myth of, Pegasus. Mia Farrow does a good job narrating the story, and I found myself much more interested in the story than any of the previous ones. Well, I should say previous one, fables and nursery rhymes. To be fair though, I am being a bit biased here because, I do like Greek mythology stories. In any case, the minigames in Pegasus are the exact same type of games found in the Brer Rabbit game, and they're equally as insulting. Again, I don't have much to say here because, I already said it. Also, like Brer Rabbit, there's a section for parents to learn more about the story, as well as read about activities to do with their child based off the story. So again, that's pretty cool. So even though I don't have a lot to say about the game itself, I actually do like this title. The artwork is great, Mia Farrow is great, and the story is great. I love Greek mythology, so this is right up my alley. The only issue for me is I would have liked to see some animation, but I guess that is par for the course with these games. With that being said, I'm giving Pegasus 3 Pegasi? Sure, 3 Pegasi out of 5. So I have one more game with a big name actor, and I'm actually really excited for this one. Up next is Pecos Bill. Pecos Bill features the talents of Robin Williams. I believe Robin Williams needs no introduction. However, just in case you do need an introduction, his most notable roles include Mrs. Doubtfire, Good Morning Vietnam, Good Will Hunting, Jumanji, and Aladdin. Those that grew up in the 90s remember him fondly, and kids today should honestly seek out his films. But with all that being said, let's check out Pecos Bill. And here's our familiar friend. As one should expect at this point, Pecos Bill has that familiar layout that we've seen with the previous 2 games. I won't go into detail about that again, so let's move on. I'm not familiar with this story at all, so I'm going into this blind. I'm excited for this game though, solely based on Robin Williams, so let's see if it holds up.
Had a powerful fear of getting hemmed in by neighbors. When Bill was only a couple of weeks old, his father decided the family was gonna move. Some other family had moved in right next door, which was only 200 miles away. "If it's one thing I can't stand," said Bill's father, "it's being cramped by squatters." The cowboy couldn't believe his eyes either, because as you can imagine, Bill was quite a sight for the stranger to behold. He looked down at Bill from his horse and said, "Well, you're as naked as a jaybird, partner. Why in tarnation you running around without clothes? Did you lose 'em in a poker game, or you just glad to see me?" "What do you mean, naked?" Bill howled. "I'm a coyote, and coyotes don't wear no clothes." "That'll be the day," said the cowboy. "You're no coyote, shucks, you don't even have a tail. You're a human being." Bill turned his head to look down along his backside, and by Jiminy, hoo-de-doo, he didn't have a tail. But Bill was not completely convinced. After all, he was happy to be a coyote. "But I've got fleas, and I howl at the moon at night," Bill replied. "Well, gwan. Everybody knows that all Texicans got fleas and howl at the moon." Bill didn't want to believe he was no longer a coyote, but this stranger had made several valid points. The cowboy was a neighborly sort, so he gave Bill the extra set of duds he kept in his saddlebag. And as soon as Bill put on these clothes, it was like he was a natural-born cowboy. It took Bill an hour to learn how to talk. Back in those days, coyote lingo and Texican were almost the same language, basically a lot of howls and vowels. He had only 50 words to learn. Bill had woke up thinking he was a coyote, and by sundown he was a walking, talking cowboy. Naturally, he still had more than a few coyote notions left in him. It ended up being a pretty full day for Pecos Bill.
So, it's pretty decent. Robin Williams tells the story in a southern accent, or I guess cowboy accent, which kinda gets tiring after a while. He honestly sounds a lot like Jim Varney when Jim is playing his Ernest character. Well, to me at least. You can tell that Williams is enjoying himself though with this, so I certainly can't complain about that. The one gripe that I do have is that the music seems to compete with Robin Williams. By that, I mean it's so loud that you can't really hear him at times. And when there's no music, sometimes his voice comes off as echoey. And that's just really weird. It sounds like they didn't do any editing of the audio. The artwork in Pecos Bill is decent, but I still prefer the art style I saw in Pegasus. The story is interesting, to say the least. I'm not really into westerns, but this story is goofy enough that it kept me entertained. It's no town with no name, but it'll do. So, I had the same gripes with Pecos Bill as I did with the last couple of games that I showed. No animation, bad minigames, poor replayability, but a pretty interesting story. I'm going to go with 3 Pecos Bills out of 5 for this title, mostly because of Robin Williams. So again, these aren't necessarily games that I would have normally reviewed for a spotlight, but I was curious about what having a high-profile actor would do for these games. Surprise, surprise, the answer is not much. But it is interesting to see high-profile actors in CDI games. I'm not sure if this actually helps sell any of the games. I kind of doubt it actually, but it is pretty cool. Fun fact, there are more of these games out there. That list includes How the Rhinoceros Got Its Skin, which features both Jack Nicholson and Raul Julia. How the Camel Got Its Hump, which also features Jack Nicholson and Raul Julia. The Emperor's New Clothes, which features John Gielgud, I believe that's how you pronounce it. And Girls Club, which features Heidi Lucas. Girls Club is actually a pretty rare title, and I did have a chance to purchase it recently, but with a price of $80, I passed. It does look unique though when compared to most of the games that I showcased today. The other games that I mentioned, the Rhino and the Camel, those all appear to be similar to the ones that I reviewed today. It ultimately kind of sucks that they limit these games to one story per disc. I feel like these discs could fit more than one story on them, but I guess it was a way for Philips to get more money out of their customers. Well, in any case, I do hope you enjoyed diving into these 5 games with me. Maybe if I manage to grab more titles like these, I'll do another gauntlet of mini-reviews, even though I have a feeling the gameplay and my synopsis or my ratings probably won't change much. Either way though, until next time, thank you for watching.